say hello to Beatrix. We're going to paint her together today. I started off a few of our pieces just to save time, and we are going to walk through each of those. I have her frame already done, as well as the stand, both sides with cocoa. I put them all on with a baby wipe. Most of you are familiar with that, but I am going to demonstrate on the back. So those are ready to go, except for possibly sanding. I also started off her head by just getting a coat of white on here. I used the up and down motion with my foam brush. You could use a foam wedge or circle sponge, whatever works for you. If you go too much into her engraving, you can pick that out with a small pin, but she's ready to go. Then I also helped out time-wise by doing some of our words here. I painted the letters with white, again, same thing, using our foam brush, small amounts of paint in an up and down motion. Same thing with my pink here. I mixed a little bit of our hot pink into our white to make a little lighter shade. Did her collar and the background for our letters. They're all glued except these last couple. I am using super glue, which you always want to use caution with. Couple little spots of super glue. Oops, a little bit of is not coming out. I think we're clogged here. There we go. Little bit of super glue and get those into position. If you're using your tube of super glue that comes with your kit, you want to be careful in puncturing it and using it. You can always use white glue. It just will need more time to set up and dry. So those are painted and glued, ready to go for later. Okay. Our background. I am going to use the baby wipe method with some Provence paint. Get a fresh baby wipe here. I'm simply going to give myself a little bit of Provence paint, and I'm going to take that with my baby wipe and spread it out on my background board. I'm just going to cover the whole thing. I much prefer this method. It's quick, it's easy. You don't have to do this. You can brush it on if you want. You can use a roller. You can use a sponge. I really like this because I like the wood grain and it dries so fast that I can move on to additional steps. Now, in my original sample, it's a little bit lighter than this one because I did add some white. I'm gonna just get myself a little bit of white. I'm gonna turn my baby wipe to another spot where it's a little bit more wet. I'm gonna grab a little white and I'm just kind of adding it in here. I'm not trying to cover the whole thing, just giving some shading. As you're watching, you can see I'm sort of going up and down the whole time. It's just my preferred way of doing it. If you start to go around this way, you know, that's entirely up to the look you're looking for. I just kind of like to keep it one direction. Now, you can sand that when it's dry. I usually like to do that because you do raise the grain a little bit and you also have some fuzzies sometimes from your baby wipe or if you're using a paper towel for sure. My background does have polka dots. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to set this aside. I do have our flowers for her. I already painted the background green, some yellow and pink flowers just to kind of speed things up a little bit. I am going to create a purple. So in your kit, you have some Provence, which is what we just used on the background. You also have Capri, which is the hot pink. And I'm going to take some of both of those and I am going to mix them together to make myself some purple. So I'm just taking a little bit of the pink, a little bit of the Provence, and I'm making myself a shade of purple. I'm going to use that here on these couple remaining flowers. And I'm also going to put some purple on her dress and headband. Okay, so these will get, actually I'm just going to glue them right now. The other ones are already glued. I'm just going to plop these guys in here in their respective locations. And then we'll add some more details to those, come on, later on, okay? So there, our flowers are just about ready to go. Kind of plain, we'll jazz them up a little bit. But I'm going to continue on with her dress and her headband. And I'm going to, again, use that baby wipe. I'm going to make a little more purple here. And just mixing my Capri and my Provence together. I'm going to use the baby wipe to stain her dress. You do not have to use the baby wipe method. I find it quick and easy. I use it a lot. So I'm just getting this on her dress. Very little paint. I'm not trying to glob it on. I can take a little bit of the Provence, the teal, and even add some shading. Okay, and I'm gonna get a new baby wipe. Mine's getting a little dry. I'm going to take some of that same paint and I'm going to do up her headband. And you see, when you have a wet baby wipe, look at the difference. It gives you a lighter shade. I have very little paint on here because I don't want to glob it into the engraving. And if that happens, you can use a push pin. I just happen to have one of my pickers here. And you can kind of wipe it out some with that. You can, again, like I said, grab a different color, do some shading. Let me bring this camera down a little bit. I just picked up a little of the pink on my baby wipe, and I'm just kind of blending it in. Grab a little more purple. Just playing with it, really. Okay. So I really like her with that color. Okay, let me set her aside to do some drying. And I'm gonna bring back over my background, which is really already dry. I am going to just give it a quick sand. I have this handy dandy sander. I get no compensation from Amazon, but I love these little guys. Great for putting sandpaper on. So I just smoothed that out a little bit, get rid of my dust. And when it comes to doing polka dots, I'm not gonna do this entire thing right now while you're watching because it will take quite a bit of time. You can find yourself some kind of a straight edge, a ruler. I'm just grabbing the first thing that I have handy, which happened to be a roll of plastic wrap. And I am going to just line it up with the indentations there, just to give myself a line to go with. I'm gonna just use the end of a paintbrush, just an artist brush that I have laying here. If you wanted to do the toothpick thing, you could. You don't even have to do what I'm going to do. You can simply leave your background as is. You could, if you really wanted to play around and have some fun, you could use some decoupage paper on the background. Maybe I'll do one of those and post it. I'm mixing a little bit of the hot pink into some white just to mix some up. And all I am simply going to do for this entire thing is I am going to just find my center here. And I am simply just making some dots about probably 1.5 inches away from each other the whole way across my background piece. All right, there you can see them. I'm gonna just move this. All this is doing is kind of giving me a guide for where my lines are so that I'm keeping them somewhat straight. And then I will just go in the opposite spot from where the first row was. They're not perfect. I'm just adding them on here with the end of my brush. Let me do it on the opposite side here just to give you another look at it. So just kind of eyeballing it. You certainly could measure if you wanted to measure. And I am simply just using this as a guide to help me sort of get them in approximately the same location each time I put one of my dots down. Okay. We can continue on with that for the entire piece. I'm not going to spend all that time to do that with you. Then you're going to simply put your frame around it. When you go to frame your piece, a trick that I like to do is to flip it over upside down, put your glue on the inside edge, take your piece like so, and kind of eyeball it so that it is centered the whole way around, and then you will know that you have a good spot for it, okay? It's not glued, but we're just going to go with that for right now. You're going to have your dress. There, I sanded mine up a little bit. I kind of like that. That's gonna fit right down in there. Glued, of course. Your head is going to go on here also. You could sand this. I'm not gonna glue it until I get the rest of my dots done, but that's his location, her location. I'm gonna take one of my baby wipes and a little bit of that same pink that we were using for our dots, and I am going to just wipe it in to her ears. If I get it on the edge, just take a clean spot on my baby wipe and clean that up a little bit. Same thing here on the other ear. And you could use a paintbrush or just play around with it like I have. And I need a clean spot. This is a whole lot easier to do when I have it going the right way to me. I'm gonna play with that, add a little more on there. Her headband, and I see that I got a little bit of little paint on her face there. Get rid of that. Her headband will fit right in this location. So I will be adding her face, and I like to get her position there before I put her face in here. You will receive a little stencil for her whiskers and her nose. I'm going to take a tiny, tiny bit of black paint, and I am just going to, maybe a little more than that. I'm going to just dab it up and down. Okay, my black paint dried up a little bit while we were talking. Tiny, tiny little bit of black paint to do her stencil. You are better off to do it a couple times rather than globbing it in there. Okay. I'm wiping off any excess on my brush. That doesn't mean that I won't have any little bits that are underneath my stencil, but we can always fix that if we need to. And there we go. I'm going to use, you could use the end of a broken off toothpick, or you could use the end of a paintbrush like we were doing with our polka dots before to give her her eyeballs. Okay. I'm going to take that foam brush, it's dirty from mixing up my paint, and I'm just kind of adding just some swishes of color on here. Maybe a little in there, just to give it a little more added interest. And sometimes I take my baby wipe and I rub that a little bit just to blend it. You know, you play around with it and do it however you would like. You'll see my finished pictures here. See how it looks once we're done. So now pretend we've got our polka dots on our whole thing. We will go ahead and situate our words. You definitely want to make sure you have this put together and glued before you get your words on here, so you have plenty of space to get that put together. Her spray of flowers will go here. You're going to want to zhuzh those up a little bit. You can use that dirtied up brush and add on. I'm actually going to get a little white paint here. A little bit of white. And you can just kind of touch up the edges of your flowers if you want to. Do the same thing on the edges of your greenery. Mine's got quite a bit of pink on there. I'm gonna get some more white. Let me get a clean brush here. And just touching it up there. I'm not doing anything fancy. You can always go over it with more green if you don't love it. And just playing around with it. Give it some more detail. That will get glued on right there. And her collar will go right where her head and body connects. On my sample, I added little white dots to kind of represent like pearl buttons. I added some white into the center of my flowers. My green on my first one was mixed with white to make it a little bit more pastel. You can see I added the white onto her headband, and there's the completed look with all of the dots and everything glued together. So you have these colors in your kit and you can mix them up and come up with whatever colors that you would like. Just keep in mind, you always want to add your color into your white to make a paler shade versus adding white into your darker color. So Beatrix might be my favorite project this spring. I hope that you enjoyed her.